starting Saturday, there was nothing anyone could do to stop us. And we came back with the gold medal. Honestly, refereeing is my first passion. So the creativity in game also comes from understanding the rules and what are the limitations that you can play with. Using beach handball as a tool, as a simple game, as an introduction to lower the barrier of entry.
Sophie here as well. Handball, USA against Greenland. Sophie, fast hold, baseline, straight to the other end for a goal.
Welcome to Red, White, and Blue, the U.S. Women's National Team Handball podcast. On today's episode, we have USA Team Handball Women's Beach National Team acting coach, Michelle Mensing. She grew up in Germany and was exposed to handball at a pretty early age. When her career brought her to the United States, she brought her love of handball along with her. She's a member of San Francisco Cal Heat's board of directors, founder of the U.S. Beach Handball Tour, and USA Team Handball Referee of the Year a few times over. Oh, and did I mention that when Mishi's not growing handball in the U.S., she's a software engineer? So
yes, I'm so excited to meet Michi.
I think she'll be a great podcast guest for us to have, number 2, and yeah, I think she'll have some insights from all aspects of the game.
I agree, and I'm so happy that she's on the podcast so early. I'm really happy we'll talk to her in a minute. But before, Viva, you're in the US. Let's talk a little bit about the past couple of days because you met Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, so I was invited to be a junior reporter at the WNBA draft with the junior NBA, and so it's kind of an extension of the work that I've been doing for the past 5 years, trying to, grow basketball with the Her Time to Play initiative, and so that advocates for girls to continue playing sports by the age of 14 because they're twice as likely to drop out than boys, and so that's across all sports, basketball, handball, you name it. And so they invited me to come and report on the orange carpet, which is the WNBA's version of the red carpet, where all the draftees, they come in their fancy outfits right before they're about to get drafted into the league. And so, yeah, I had the opportunity to interview Caitlin Clark, Cameron Brink, a bunch of other draftees. And so it was an amazing experience. I think I learned a lot from them, and I think that they're answers to some of my questions were super insightful. And then, of course, afterwards, I had a bought seat to watch the draft. And so that was amazing as the big basketball fan and especially WNBA fan that I am.
So walk us a little bit through because, I really know so little about the NBA draft. I think I never watched it for women or for men. And because also it's not a thing in Europe, right? And I grew up in Europe most of the time. So where was it? Now it's Thursday. I think you've been there since Monday, right? Walk us a little bit through the process.
Yeah. So the draftees, they choose 15 of them to kind of, show up and be at the draft physically. And so I think, their activities started a few days before. Of course, the draft was on Monday night. And so the 15 draftees showed up. Of course, the orange carpet was the first event, and that's where all the media was. And this year there was a bunch more media than there ever has been, with the game growing. And of course, everybody wants to get an interview with Caitlin Clark. And so that was just a really cool experience for me to see the growth of the game, from 5 years ago when I went to all the WNBA arenas to now was really, inspiring and a great moment. And so, yeah, they show up, they get interviewed by all the media, by all the press, and then it's time for them to get drafted. And so they all go up, on stage and at tables with their families and their coaches. And so there's 36, draft slots because there's 12 WNBA teams, 3 rounds of the draft. And so the Indiana Fever had the first pick this year. They also had the first pick last year. I think we were talking about, you knew the name Aaliyah Boston. She was the first pick for the Fever last year. And so this year, of course, the Fever selected Caitlin Clark, and the crowd went wild. It was the first time that they had fans at the draft in a couple years, I believe. And so, yeah, and then they just kept calling names, and of course they would get interviewed and things like that. And I think it was a great experience for them to go from the college level. Of course, now it's, on a bigger stage, and now they're getting to play. And I think in a couple weeks they're going to their training camp with their teams, and so we'll get to see them play as early as May. And I think that's one of the best things about the WNBA is the transition between the college and the WNBA seasons.
And we're a handball podcast, but Caitlin Clark is such a huge name. So maybe for those who don't know Caitlin Clark, like, why are we talking about Caitlin Clark, and why is it such a huge thing that you were there and you talked to her and interviewed her, talking about growing U.S. handball, talking about growing women's sports? So you are so much deeper into the rabbit hole of women's
Yes.
basketball and women's sports. So why does Caitlin Clark matter so much?
Yeah, so just this recent season, Caitlin Clark has kind of transcended men's and women's sports. She's broken all kinds of records. Most notably, she became the all-time leading scorer in men's or women's college basketball. And so I think that really put her on the map. And then she, in turn, helped to put women's basketball on the map. I mean, the games that she was playing in against LSU, South Carolina, they were, up to 14 million viewers. And that's more than any men's, women's basketball games, professional or collegiate. And so, it's just so many viewers. If you ask, somebody on the street, can you name a college basketball player? It's likely going to be a women's basketball player. And I think that's for one of the first times in history. And you talked about, trying to spread handball. There was one draftee from Croatia, Nika Mule. She went to UConn, and I asked her about handball. I said, I play team handball for the United States. Did you play handball growing up? And she said she did, and that, she wanted to, have all these opportunities to play sports, and basketball wasn't really big where she grew up. And so she played handball, and that helped her a lot on the court. And so that was, really fun. You see these big names of the draftees, but when you can have a real conversation with them, it's really exciting.
That's so awesome. So one more question before we go and talk to Michi. What did you ask Caitlin Clark and what did she answer?
Yeah, so the one that's posted on my Instagram, I think, is like, how do you use your voice and your platform to advocate for what you believe in? And so, of course, if you go to my Instagram, Viva_Las Vegas, you can see that one. I asked her a few other questions. One was about the Her Time to Play initiative that I talked about earlier. And I asked her if she ever felt like she wanted to quit playing sports. And she was honest. She said, no, I never felt that way. And so I thought that was funny that she was able to be honest, but, still gave a great answer. And then I asked her another question just about, with millions tuning in to watch women's basketball, what advice do you have for new fans of the game? What should they be on the lookout for? Who should they cheer for? Things like that. And yeah, just a few other questions about the impact of her game on our game as a whole.
Amazing.
So,
all right, let's go from Caitlin Clark to Michi. That's a big step. But we're back to handball, right?
Sounds good. I can't wait to hear what she has to say.
All right, then let's meet Michi.
Today, we're joined by Michelle Mensing, fresh off an exciting past week as the U.S. women's beach team qualified for the World Championships. So can you start by just telling us a little bit about that tournament?
Puerto Rico was amazing. We actually were very fortunate with weather, which for beach tournaments is definitely something that if you're coming from indoor, you have to get used to. But the tournament organization was fantastic. It was great to see all the other national teams. The beach community is very tight. And for us, we took 3 rookies to the tournament. And I had a new assistant coach. So a lot of new faces, new thought process. And so tournament started out a bit rough, bit of misfortune with injuries too. And then we found our groove, and starting Saturday, there was nothing anyone could do to stop us. And we came back with the gold medal. I do have it here.
There we go.
So,
the hardware.
Fresh the hardware back in the States.
Yes, well, congratulations to both you and the team. I know Yeah, the weather is a big thing. Definitely coming from indoor, I think a lot of our guests. I mean, some people wear sunglasses. You have to play even if it's raining, and aspects like that that you don't really think about playing an indoor sport all your life. And so, we love hearing how people find the sport of handball. You grew up in Germany, and that's a little bit different than growing up in the U.S. in terms of handball. So, how did you find the sport?
I was very fortunate. I'm a third generation handball player, so it runs in the family. We have family gatherings, and we can make a full indoor team with just
Oh, that's
people
awesome.
last name Mensing. So my mom played up to the second Bundesliga. There's like weird video recordings of me cheering her on as a baby from that time in the Berlin area.
Wow.
I then when I started to walk, I started to play handball with Füchse Berlin, which now people know very much about. Has always been a big force in Germany, especially in Berlin, for great handball. I went through my handball education in Germany, which in the international comparison is definitely very high and highly regarded. I made it all the way to top 30 in my year in Germany. So the step just before the national team. And that as someone who did not go to sport specific schools or really committed all their life to handball, I think is still a pretty cool accomplishment. And
Absolutely.
then you get to the stage where okay, everybody is just doing handball in the morning, in the afternoon, and I think as a woman in sports, especially outside of the US, you have to make the choice: are you prioritizing a sports career or education? And I chose education, went into software engineering, but never stopped playing. So for comparison, Berlin itself has around 300 handball clubs. It's a city of 3.5 million. I think we're, I don't know, I haven't checked there. I have not lived in Berlin for quite some time. But yeah, that's where I grew up learning handball, continued to play all through me going to college, me starting in jobs, and then found my way to the US with 23 and said bye to 300 clubs within an hour driving distance to the San Francisco Bay Area, where it's one club and the next club is 6 hour driving distance away. And then I think the next one would be 15-hour driving distance. So quite a culture shock. But I would not have gone to the US without that club. So it's thanks to Calheat that I made it and stayed, especially in the US.
We have a little bit in common here, Michi, that you're German, I'm half German. I get that question a lot, like you're German, how the hell, why do you coach for the US? I can imagine you get that question, or you have been asked that question before. So what made you stick, and how do you answer that question?
So because I live in the US and I have gotten to the point where it takes people now a minute to recognize that I'm not from here. Uh, I don't get that question actually a lot. I get it
You
from my
don't?
coworkers. No, I get it
Okay.
from my coworkers in I do have coworkers in Germany, and they're like, "You're playing handball over there?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm playing," and then I'm also happen to coach. And for me, it was actually just after I moved here, I saw on Facebook a post, developmental camp for beach handball in Florida. And I'm like, I want to play beach handball in Florida. That sounds like a lot of fun. Um, and yeah, reached out to Marilyn Elder, who happened to be my assistant coach now on this Puerto Rico trip. So we're doing a bit of a full circle moment. Uh, and she said, "Yep, no problem. We always need more people." And that was perfect timing. Like I was in the right spot at the right time. They were trying to start a women's program, and the coach that was running the session made like a final selection at the end for his national team, and had forgotten that I was not American, and so I made the
Oh,
team
no.
even.
Oh wow.
That might be a
Oh.
first. You might be the first to be selected for a national team that's not of that nationality.
Yes, obviously we did never compete in that format
Yes.
officially as a national team. But after that weekend, I had my nickname Sneaky German forever established. So my players still call me Sneaky German. Like I was able to sneak in like this, but I am known like as a very smart and analytical player, and because a lot of the moves and passes, some of the girls have never seen. Right, it's a completely new movement language. They don't expect it, and then it's surprising. Like, oh, you're being sneaky again. I'm like, no, I just have a bit more tools under my belt at this point for handball, and I'm more than happy to teach you all of them.
Yeah, I had heard that nickname, but I didn't know where it came from. And when I was with the team in Puerto Rico, you did play. You stepped onto the court. We had a couple injuries, and so obviously that wasn't in an official capacity, but the sneaky German snuck onto the court in that way as well. So that was a lot of fun. And so moving on with the
Yeah.
beach handball, it was recently announced that there's going to be an exhibition preceding the Olympics in Paris this summer. Can you tell us what you know about this and then how the US is going to be represented?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been trying to get on the Olympic program for um, the longest time. Like there's been always the effort to make it to the highest sporting event, and the Olympics are actually kind of locked in terms of which sports they let onto the program or not. The host nation and the IOC can decide which programs they let enter. And there's an athlete limit, and the athlete limit has been reached for a couple of years now. So cities are no longer willing to take more athletes into their events, and we suffer from that as team sport. Any team sport that wants to become Olympic suffers from that bar of, sorry, we just cannot host more people. But fortunately, we are part of the World Games and World Beach Games, which is for all the sports that do not make the Olympic program, and that's still a great multi-sport event. But because we cannot make the Olympic status officially, we've been working with the IOC to still have it be around it, and we have not lost hope to make it Olympic. And that's where this exhibition sport comes in, to really show the audience, the IOC, what great sport this could be, and an additional sport also for the sand arena, which is a bit underutilized if you just look which sports are using the sand, and most cities bring in extra facilities here. And we are lucky enough to have 3 athletes represent us at the exhibition. Christine Mansour from our women's team, who has had a tremendous development in the past 4 or 5 years. Highly regarded, has been top scorer at multiple international events. So a great choice. Then our social media star, FBA, Udo Adoma. Also our beach handball athlete director, serving on the USA Team Handball Board. I mean, it's very hard to come across beach handball socially, like in the internet, and not come across his content, which is tremendously important. And he's been a cornerstone of the men's program for the longest time. And then the third athlete is Drew Donlin, Captain America. I was like, he's the picture boy, captain in the Space Force, and is also actively playing for our indoor national team, has been playing in Spain in the first league. So really also one of the best representatives for USA team handball and beach handball as a program. And he was fortunate enough to get the selection as well. And they'll be competing with 60 64 athletes from around the world, really showing that we are a global sport. And I think they are making 4 all-star teams, essentially. They have invited 8 coaches to lead them per gender, and then there will be a tournament of all-stars playing each other. And everyone can root for their country and the athletes that are on their respective teams.
So it's only 8 all-star teams, right?
There might be the French national team competing against the all-stars. That might be an element. I'm not sure. But
Okay.
I could see that also happening, given that it's in France.
And I really like the idea of it's kind of transcending the ideas of the Olympics because it's all these nations competing together and on one team. And I think that brings in a different element, a different, way that you can cheer for your own country, but you're also going to cheer for whoever their teammates are and whatever countries they represent.
Yeah, exactly. And the IOC has been experimenting with that format a bit, especially on the youth Olympic level, where you also have athletes from different nations come together in sports where you can pair up. I think tennis is such an example. And it adds a beautiful element, I think, overall to the sports.
Definitely. And now we're transitioning to refereeing. So you've earned USA Team Handball Referee of the Year more times than I can count. Can you talk about the value that you place on having this role in the sport of handball?
Honestly, refereeing is my first passion. So I'm doing the other things because we don't have enough people to.
Yes, okay.
But yeah, no, refereeing is crucial for the development overall, and that's why I've been putting a lot of energy into referee education, especially on the beach side, because the more firm you are with the rules, the more you can also play with them and play around them, right? So the creativity in game also comes from understanding the rules and what are the limitations that you can play with. And so that's why I was fortunate enough to be the first female beach handball referee for the newly founded North American and Caribbean nation. And just this past year, I have published an online education for referees, and half of my year is spent traveling to beach handball tournaments, and wherever somebody raises their hand, I'm like, I want to referee. They're signed on, and I'll train them right on the spot. And I think in that regard, beach handball is a lot easier to pick up and learn for players and referees because it's a simpler game. But it's often like a direct slope to introducing them to indoor handball with more complexity, more rules. And so I've seen some of my beach athletes transition to indoor, and I think that's key, not only for development of referees in beach, but development of referees overall. Because body language, managing players, managing coaches during games, and I know my referee friends that watch this will chuckle because I'm not the easiest as a coach because I challenge them on rules. But yeah, that
I've been part of
skill.
that.
Yes,
I had that first-hand experience in LA.
That skill or that skill translates to both sports or to any sport where you are a referee. And so I think if you are with aspirations to become a high level referee, these kind of experiences are invaluable for the growth of USA Team Handball.
And where can people find the
Congratulations.
referee training course?
That is on our membership platform, Sports 80. So if you Google USA Team Handball Sports 80, you'll find our membership platform. And then there's on the site online training section, and you can find the referee courses there, timekeeper, scorekeeper. And then we are right now also working on coaching education, becoming part of that online offering. All of that is for free. You might have to have a membership, but I think that's a fair price for also all the people that put their energy into creating the courses and the education content behind it, because that doesn't fall out of the trees. If it would be this easy, we would have had it years ago, right?
Okay, now we can move on to some listener questions. So these are questions that listeners sent in either on our Instagram or on the Spotify comment section. So the first one is, how do you suggest growing beach handball at the youth level?
Oh, interesting question. Actually, I don't think that it needs much. I think it needs a dedicated group of people. Beach handball, especially in our region, is in the youth category is very much underdeveloped. Puerto Rico and Mexico are really the only programs that have youth categories, and they are doing a fantastic job. But truly, I think the best way is just to find someone who's passionate about coaching and is willing to learn. I'm more than happy to help educate that person, and then it's about collecting a group of athletes. It doesn't have to be from the entire country, right? If you just want a program to start in one pocket where you have access to sand readily available. It doesn't cost you anything. So the southern states in the US are definitely easier to do that with, and just get yourself a local group of girls together, and that is the only group then playing, and that becomes the national team, right? Obviously, there is then official selection processes that come with it, but it starts with one dedicated person that's willing to do the work of a coach, and that is uncomfortable enough for some to never start it. It is time consuming, but it's also rewarding, tremendously rewarding, especially with youth athletes. You just see them grow day by day, and I think So all you need is group of girl athletes, male athletes, a bit of time to and the sand of any kind really available, because I do think that aspect is important. But you don't need a full beach handball court either, right? You can go out on your closest beach volleyball court and just use that half. And the majority of the skills you can practice there. And all the coaching stuff, I know Michael Hinson on the men's side, myself, whoever was in coaching before and supported, we're more than happy to help share our knowledge and grow people.
I would say it's right now way easier to develop beach, given that you have already those existing hubs, right? It's San Diego, LA, San Francisco with Cal Heat, probably, and Florida as well, right?
Yes, yeah. So the majority or the bigger centers where you really can play beach handball all around is in California and Florida. They have great weather most of the time.
Yeah.
So unfair advantage, but yeah. So if you're in San Diego, if you're in Los Angeles, great opportunities to start something. If you're in the St. Pete, Orlando area in Florida, there are dedicated clubs that are really just doing beach handball. And then if you live in other parts in the country, the Midwest, all the indoor teams, they usually do play beach handball also in the summer. And I think that's also how it can be, right? You don't have to play it all year round. You can reserve it to be your summer sport and enjoy indoor the rest of the time. But yeah, we have, so I run a website called the USA Beach Handball Tour, where I list out all the clubs that are doing beach handball activities, and people are more than welcome to go to that website and see where is the closest club. And if not, we have also published little help guides on how do you start your own club, how do you run your own beach handball tournament, because it's first of all, it's about playing and enjoying the sport that you're playing, and then competition and national team aspirations can come after. But you can just have a great time with your friends and play beach handball.
That's a great answer, and I think you read my mind, because I was about to ask the next listener question, which would be, how can people become involved in beach handball in the US, right? Tryouts or events. So you already said it. Now, we talked outside this podcast because you're recruiting for the national team. So maybe I just can follow up that question with, what are you looking in an athlete or somebody now, not starting beach handball, but who do you like to recruit for the national team at this point?
Yeah. So personally, I think having the ability to come together as a program without everyone having to take up loans to travel and spend thousands of dollars, that has always been very close to me. And so that's why you see the beach program also mostly consisting of athletes that are located in the US, which still means a lot of money for travel because Germany is the size of California, and
Hmm.
California is just one of the 51 states, right? So travel for a national team activity is still sometimes a travel of 9 hours for some athletes. And so I prefer stateside athletes because of the logistical challenge around. We're not closed off to American citizens living abroad, but it's always more challenging to integrate them. And so, in the recent example in Puerto Rico, we did take Ia from our youth indoor national team because she plays beach handball in Norway. And so I knew, okay, the understanding for the game is there, the skills are there. And for the position that I was looking for, which was the specialist, the isolation is not as big of a problem as if you would be a defender and we have to work on the defense lineup together, right? So for certain positions, the geographical challenge is not too bad, and so that's where I would be looking outside. But in general, honestly, any athlete that has an affinity to beach, like being in sand, moving in sand, because that can already eliminate half of your pool. Because
Hmm.
some people will just say, "I don't like sand. I this is not my thing," and so half of the people are then already gone. Um, I've seen and this is always funny to me, and it speaks to how different the sports are. Uh, I've seen first league players in indoor Spanish German league come to the beach with all their athleticism and do so poorly that they would not make a team. And this is someone who gets the MVP trophy in an indoor tournament, right? And then you put them on the beach and they're just so distracted by the sand and
Out of their
the
element.
different conditions. They're out of their element. And so it's for someone who can recognize it's a very comical moment for sure. And so I like to recruit outside of the handball community actually, because I don't, for some positions I don't need you to have handball skills at all. And I think that's why we have such luck recruiting also fairly high level athletes, because we don't need them, all of them, to shoot great. The majority of my team feels more comfortable doing a 360 shot than a regular shot. Uh,
Really?
yes, yes, right, because we just got rid of the limitation that you have to know indoor.
Hmm.
That's Let's look at the sport differently. It's a new sport. You need these kind of abilities. We've recruited cheerleaders because they're great in tumbling and have great body control and vertical awareness, right? We recruited gymnasts. I'm like, if you think about these two profiles playing indoor,
Yeah.
you're like, not my first choice.
No, it's really
uh,
basketball.
yeah, and basketball good for defense because they are used to the spatial awareness that you need for zone defense, which is one of the dominant types in beach handball. Um, not
But
all,
if
and they translate obviously to the pivot where it's a lot of alley oops. So I'm like, okay, they know alley oops, but they're not natural for the other positions. It's really, I'm like, basketball recruits, I haven't picked up that many for exactly that reason.
Yeah, I was going to say a
Do
basketball
you see?
player or a volleyball player might not be as comfortable doing the 360. And so, yeah, the way that you speak to each sport can transfer a different asset to the beach is really interesting. And so, what does the future of beach handball in the United States look like to you?
So I want to focus on us growing more clubs so that we do not have to travel to Brazil and Europe for good competition. And so I will be, end of April, I'll be in Kentucky supporting there the next local tournament that we're running. And so my dream is that by next year we have like a fixed calendar with beach handball tournaments throughout the summer. We are supporting our two beach handball only focus clubs in the San Diego, or we have three clubs actually now. The San Diego Sea Dragons, the RIP Beach Handball Club or LA Beach Handball Club in Los Angeles, and then the St. Pete Parakeets in Florida. That would be my focus on growing clubs around them so that we have local leagues there. It can spread out. If somebody in Alaska wants to start playing beach handball, I'm more than happy to help them get a kick started, right? But that wouldn't be my focus, right? We want to grow the centers that we have and grow out from there. Whoever wants to pick it up, more than happy to. We'll add you to the list, right? But I think we also need to recognize that we don't have resources to do everything. I have a full-time job next to handball, which some people ask me, do you even sleep? And yes, I do sleep enough. But yeah, so we need to be conscious about the resources that we have. So focusing on the hubs that we established. One opportunity that we're closely looking at is there are the Venice Beach Games in Santa Monica near Los Angeles. So everyone knows the big pier with the fair, right, and that very popular tourist situation right next to Muscle Beach. So we've been talking there with the organizers that we could get a full tournament spot, 4 to 8 courts if we wanted to, and just have a great showcase and tournament there, interactivity zone, everything. So we want to focus on these type of events to just recruit more people in the area where we have already support with athletes, with coaches there, and slowly grow out from there. Play with Canada, play with Mexico, and hopefully all that recruiting effort then results in us being able to choose from more athletes, because selections right now on the beach site are still fairly easy to manage because you have a pool of maybe 25 athletes on the women's side that are eligible. And so not comparable with indoor where you can have hundreds apply on men's or women's side. So I hope that situation changes and makes it more challenging to select national teams and really reward players that put in all the work to become better at beach handball with the playing opportunity as competing and representing their country internationally.
Yeah, those local clubs or local hubs, better to say, that keep growing. I think that is one of the big keys for both beach and indoor to grow at some point, right? To reach dimensions that are somehow close to what we know in Europe, right? You mentioned one interesting point. Do you get enough sleep? So one of the next questions that we have from our listeners, it's twofold. A question, how did you get into coaching? And I think you touched on that a little bit, but maybe what part keeps you in coaching? Because especially in the US, no money for coaching. Like, you really have to be passionate. Like, so how did you get in, and what keeps you running?
Yeah. So I got into it because I saw a stop in development with our athletes. And I saw that if I would be playing, or I was playing with the athletes, I was practicing with the athletes on the beach site. And I noticed the difference of me being on the court with my skills and essentially facilitating gameplay, and me being off the court and what kind of learning can happen when I'm not there, and how I can provide or help the athletes that are new to the sport with my background in beach and indoor that I have from Germany. And so that was the moment where I'm like, okay, I need to for the sake of the program, I need to take a step back from me playing myself, and give back in a different way. And so I so we did most of the camps in Los Angeles, and so I would travel. I would pick the Greyhound bus, take it for $5 down
Oh
south,
no.
middle of the night on Friday evening.
You had the
Hop on.
Greyhound bus experience. Wow.
I have the strategies. If somebody needs strategies, how do you get 2 seats on a Greyhound? I have them down for sure. But so I would hop in 11 p.m. Friday in the Bay Area in San Francisco. Hop onto the bus, $5, and then 4 or 5 a.m. would just be in LA. Go to Denny's, have my breakfast, and head to the beach. And then my players would always find me just watching the sunrise, and like take a picture, because I would just like back, or I don't know if I had a suitcase with me, suitcase on the sand, just watching the sunrise on the beach.
The
So
dedication that
and
takes.
yeah, so I've always been someone who's been very crafty and resourceful, and I grew up even in Germany, and I think that's also where a lot of people that have failed maybe doing something in the US didn't have that background. I grew up in a family where volunteering at handball events, that was the normal thing to do. Like in Berlin, we have this giant youth tournament across 14 different gyms, all youth categories running at once, 2 tournaments per category. And so I was leading an entire gym and tournament by the age I was 14 as a volunteer, right? Never saw pay for any of that. So that volunteering gene was just passed on. I was like, okay, this is how you live handball. This is how you give back. And that, one, the skill of organizing a tournament and in general organizing handball activities, that translated then to me being able to say, okay, I'm ready to spend my free time this way. And then I also have to thank my software engineering job and my employer SAP that I can do this, I'm financially stable enough to do it and spend the money that you spend on handball and you spend on coaching, and get the time off as well, and the flexibility. So that is a huge and long-winded way of saying this is kind of what brought me to coaching and why I can stay in coaching, and why I continue to coach as well, because I think there's a lot of people out there like me that had been fortunate enough to grow up in a country where they've learned the skills, they can actually talk about the skills, and they can share that knowledge. And some of them might be financially not in the situation to help. But even the little nugget, going to a clinic, helping there, volunteering for a shift, volunteering at nationals as a scorekeeper, timekeeper, these little things help because they inspire the next generation to do the same. And we've done that very successfully in the San Francisco Bay Area. And in the past national college championship, we had 3 of our youth players that we had worked with in the Bay Area. They went on to college and they each started their own handball club at college and brought it to college nationals. So this, you showcasing that you want to volunteer and give your time. And I believe it's even National Volunteer Week right now as we record it.
Oh, perfect.
That's it. This is the backbone. This is the backbone on how we get further. Like, resources are as they are. There can be people focusing on just increasing the resources, and then the rest of the people just accept that situation and be creative and ideate around it. There's no, I've always been with that. I'm like, I don't need to whine that there's no money for it. I just need to find a way to not have it cost money, right? So we wanted to stream every game in San Francisco that our players went to, because our players came from 20 different countries. We wanted all their families to be able to take part in this hobby. So I sat down, I'm like, okay, let me figure out live streaming setup for $0. And we made it work, right? Someone had a camera, DSLR. We picked up OBS as a streaming platform. I mean, software engineering helps as a skill, definitely to connect the dots, but it's not that you don't need a computer science degree to stream something these days for $0, and it looks halfway okay. But yeah, that's the spirit that I think you need to be successful. You need to get the opportunities here in the US, and it's also fun. Honestly, coaching with pay and coaching in Germany, I would argue I have not coached in Germany. I need to disclaim that, but that is easy. That is an easy job, right? If you really truly want to showcase that you're a great coach, try coaching in the US, where
Absolutely.
much more difficult the situation around it, the kind of learning you have to do, the kind of levels you have to combine from someone who played first league to someone who's first day handball, right? That's the coaching challenge. So everyone who wants to showcase how great they are in coaching, well, like, come over to the US. We need more coaches. We need more people that help.
Yeah, well, you could argue
That's
that USA
definitely
Team
true.
Handball is built on the backs of volunteers, but I think you're definitely the epitome of that. And so, where can people follow you and the team?
So the team is active on Instagram. We have a USAWBH is, I believe, the account. So we have their dedicated account. USA Team Handball accounts are also great for following them. And then people can find me, one with the US Beach Handball Tour. So that's me behind the work. So if they reach out there, or just look for Michelle Mensing, because that's the handball name that I'm known by. It's very interesting because it's sort of established itself that I have a handball name and I have a real life name. So
Plus Sneaky
Michi
German,
Mensing
that's
is the
another
handball
handball
name.
name.
Plus sneaky German, exactly.
Before we before we go into a couple of questions that we asked at the very end to all of our podcast guests, I have actually one coach to coach kind of question. So we recently been with the junior indoor team in Mexico, right? We played 5 games in 5 days. Viva has been part of that team.
Yeah,
Talking
I
about
can agree.
differences in between talking about differences between Europe and North America. That is something you only see, I think, in North America. So walk us one more time a little bit through your experience in Puerto Rico. So for especially for those listeners, we have a lot of listeners in Germany, right? How you show up in Puerto Rico? How's the communication with the organizers? How many days do you play? How often? How much break? Like, I think it's exhausting for sure, but walk us a little bit more through that experience you had.
Yeah, absolutely. So beach handball tournaments on the continental level are usually 3, 4 days, usually 4 days events. So this past camp in Puerto Rico, that was a 4-day event. And beach handball, because it's only 2 times 10 minutes plus shootout, right? You can actually play twice a day, which is okay for athletes because the recovery time is often long enough. For coaches, is not great because you're preparing for 2 matches the day before. World Championships. I've been with the US to 2 World Championships now. In China will be the third. They are usually 6 days, and you have a 1 game, 2 game, 1 game, 2 game, 1 game, 2 game schedule, or flipped rather, because the last game you usually have just placements. But so that's kind of the rhythm. So when you prepare for, or when we prepare for the bigger tournaments, we like to have a camp with the team or the people that are close to selection. 50 days before, I would say 45 days is kind of when we have to make the selection usually. So we try to get around together. because of resources and days and times off in the US. Legally, you only have 10 days. When we compare to Germany with 30, that's already the first obstacle. So right now, we often resort to just 2 days of training camp on the weekend to really minimize the impact on paid time off for the players. And so Puerto Rico, we had maybe half the team at that camp because of other reasons. So it was a bit of a mixed preparation, and a couple of players, and that's a thing specifically on the women's side, right? We have players on the senior teams that are becoming mothers, right? And that's beautiful, but that obviously means that they are out for a certain period. So we do have 2-3 athletes that are enjoying their family time right now and cannot make the selection, right? So more obstacles than a men's coach probably has to deal with. And then we and hopefully on the youth and junior teams, we also don't deal with these issues as much. But yeah, so our preparation was a bit mixed, and we took 3 people, one of which had 2 days of beach handball experience. And she was at the camp, and I was like, we have the spot open, and what you've shown me today is enough for me to say, yeah, I'll take you with me, and we'll train you on the job, essentially. And so because that preparation was so mixed, we decided to come a day early, have 2 training sessions before the tournament started, just to even see each other for the first time in some instances, right? And then tournament started. We played Trinidad and Tobago first, which they are still one of the weaker programs in our continental bracket. But they always have like good athletes newly recruited as well. So you never know with Trinidad and Tobago where they are. And we were able to win that game. We had an injury pickup, so we needed to switch out strategy. So a lot of the preparation for that team was just focusing on what are the skills that we can do well and base the game plan off of our skills rather than this is the opponent, these are their weaknesses, let's exploit them this way. Because we also don't have a lot of footage on Trinidad and Tobago, right? Puerto Rico, we just had them, we just played them in September last year. So we had footage, we had more background. So as a coach, now you can do video analysis. And if you compare it to Germany, right? Germany travels with a 4-person staff usually around their teams, right? There's someone dedicated for video analysis. That is all merging into the 2 people that are trying to run a beach handball team. But we still do video analysis in preparation for the games. And then the usual rhythm is you play your games, or at least for Puerto Rico, we were able to do that. We play our games in the morning, and then we had the afternoon off. And so we could do a team meeting with the team, go watch video again, look at ourselves, look at the opponents, come up with a game plan, and then maybe do some dry walkthroughs as well. And then you go into the next game and next day. And that's how the entire tournament then proceeds and grows. And tiebreakers in beach handball were things. So they're because we lost our game against Puerto Rico, the second match, there's the magic of tiebreakers in beach handball where, okay, if people tie because of the games won and lost, because you can never tie in beach handball, it goes to the sets that you win. So there would have been weird math happening if Puerto Rico would have lost to Mexico and we would have won against Mexico. And we've been lucky in our last Continental Federation where that went our favor, where yes. we won the 3-way tie and managed to qualify for the World Championships. This time we could avoid that because Puerto Rico beat also Mexico, who is considered part of the 2 strongest programs in our bracket. So they beat them, and so then it was just okay, win every match from here on out, win against Canada, win against Mexico, and then win the final for the gold medal. But qualification already was both teams that entered the final were qualified. So yeah, that's the rhythm of a beach handball national team tournament. Very fast, not there. I think sleep is definitely more of a luxury for on the side of coaches. But for the athletes, usually it's actually quite well paced.
Glad to hear that.
All right, should we get into our positive 2 minutes? So it's 2 quick questions to end the episode. The first one is, what's the glue that you think will make handball stick in the United States?
Not doing glue. That's probably the glue. No, so obviously being beach handball, I think finding or using beach handball as a tool, as a simple game, as an introduction to lower the barrier of entry, having schools play it on grass, on sand, whatever, so that they experience a handball-like game. That will be, I think, the most successful path to growing more indoor programs, because once you have a group that wants to play the sport with each other, then they can get organized and find the money to rent a gym, get equipment, get goals, right? All these challenges that you face as a club. Oftentimes for beach handball, you just mark some lines in the sand. You still need goals, but the cost of entry is a lot lower. So the way I think handball will stick is by being more inventive on how we introduce players to the sport itself.
And the last one, imagine you're in the huddle with handball players from around the world. What advice from your own experiences do you share with them?
Do not look for handball players for beach handball.
I like it.
That's really it.
All right. And then we had Martin on the podcast, and one of the questions that he suggested was, who would you like to see on the podcast in the future? So how would you answer that question?
I think it would be very interesting to have a college athlete, someone who started a college club, because they sit kind of at the intersection of not having access to a lot of expats and Europeans and also other nations, but mostly Europeans, that can teach them a lot, but having also access to a lot of American citizens or people that never played the sport. So I think finding someone who has started college clubs, maybe multiple, successfully, that would be an interesting choice.
Love
All
that
right.
answer. We definitely have, we have nobody lined up so far. So that is a great hint to who we should look out for.
Yep. I mean, JD or Martin Belello. If you want to go, I personally, I think the Kentucky club is a very interesting club.
Yeah, I've seen
they
them
do their beach handball tournament
indoors,
Yeah,
right?
They don't travel far. They do also indoor, right? They, like anything in the Midwest, they're ready to go and show up, right? They don't travel far, but they'll just focus on that. And they now started interacting with the closest university to them as well. So they might be an interesting. They're from Kentucky. Kentucky is also interesting in general, I think, for international listeners. I think California is still very moderate, like in terms of culture shock, than Kentucky, Texas, Florida. Like that's definitely more the stereotypical American experience, I would say.
It's a whole nother ball game.
Yeah, but it's beautiful, right? And I think that's also beautiful with national teams. You have them come from everywhere and trying to figure out how to work together. And the same with all the clubs, right? We have, because everybody comes from everywhere, playing handball feels different in the US. So I play myself still. I think it feels different because all the players that show up, they actually want to show up. There's nobody that just, oh yeah, I've been doing this for 20 years. I really don't like handball anymore, but my best friend is here. We don't have these people here. And you sense that also on the beach handball side. Beach handball has a lot of legacy in Europe, right? And was the party alternative to handball. Was like the quick thing you did in the summer. Beach handball here in the US, that practices, they go for 360s. They go for the really exhausting parts of beach handball where you need to be in shape, and they're more than happy about it. I think it also contributes that you cannot drink alcohol in public. That contributes to that as well. But nonetheless, like the way you play here, handball or beach handball, is just different to the way you play in a country where it's established. Like everyone has more passion, wants to be there, and wants to share and grow and learn.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, Mishi. It was great talking with you and learning more about beach handball. We're just going to finish up with our own little socials and a call to action question. So you can find
I
us
have one
on.
more question.
Oh, yes.
Yes, Viva, because you played with us.
I
What
did.
did you think? Because you're between chairs, and we have more and more people between chairs. Been, I don't know. I hope, Hendrik, I hope I don't steal players from your world championship
Oh,
and play at the same
no.
time. But
Yeah.
you're
Well,
you're between chairs.
I would
How does
say
that?
it's of course, a similar environment with, like you talked about, you have to be dedicated to play handball in the United States. But I would say, it's a different group, it's a different environment. Of course, I'd come from playing with the juniors, and then, the beach team they're all adults, right? And it's like a different concept. But I think the beach community is really welcoming, and I know I personally felt very welcomed and understood. And I'm still learning, obviously, and everybody was really okay with that and wanted to teach me and wanted to help in any way that they could. And so I think just having that opening and welcoming environment is something that will allow beach handball to grow in the future, even if it's more exponentially than indoor handball.
That's great to hear, because that's truly,
Yes.
as a coach, right? The only goal you should have is players come back better, regardless what you won. Players come back better and really enjoyed the experience.
Absolutely. It was a lot of fun, and I think that's the most important thing about any sport, whether it's indoor or on the sand. And so to listen to this podcast, you can go on Spotify. It's Red, White, and Blue. You can follow us on Instagram at both USA Team Handball, USA Handball WNT. Of course, you can follow the beach team at, I think it's USAWBH. And then all of these recordings, so if you want to see us live, it's on USA Team Handball's YouTube channel. And so our call to action question to drop in the comments below or send us a DM on socials is send in your questions for Danilo. He's going to be our next guest, and he's the head coach of the junior men's national team.
So thank you everybody for tuning in, and thank you, Mishi, for coming on the podcast. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me.